But up first, we are going to be talking about the big announcement from AEW with the addition of Collision. And joining us now, Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, who is with us, who was watching front and center at the WBD Upfront presentation. And we have learned that the Joe Schmo show is coming back.
It is.
We are going to be, dissecting that in great detail at a future date. But then slid in right at the end was the announcement of Collision, which actually the news was put out a half hour before the official announcement was made. It was as though they could tell the future, and thus the announcement was made. And then, this was not some grand big announcement by WBD. It was sort of just slotted in at the end of this presentation, 2 more hours of wrestling on Saturday night, but it was certainly the focus of this particular space going into Wednesday.
Yeah, I had the sense this morning that expectations were very high in terms of what we were going to learn this morning. And I guess I had the sense going into it, at least by then, that it was going to be, you're probably going to get AEW Collision confirmed as a real show that's happening on Saturday night, which it is, 8 to 10, 2 hours long, every Saturday night. So that's happening. But in terms of any information about AEW presence on Max, there is a press release that says All Access is coming to Max, I believe June 9th. So if you want to watch All Access, that'll be there.
Spoiler, Adam Cole returns to the ring.
Yes, he overcomes his concussion. But no All In on Max, at least at this point. No next day Dynamite and Rampage on Max, none of that. So, and no CM Punk out there on the stage with Kathleen Finch.
Not on the stage, but the man made a presence nonetheless today, yes. Which, my capacity for dissecting this individual, I have pretty much hit my max. But I would say that coming out of this, you're left with, I would say, a lot of questions. The biggest being the value that Collision brings to AEW. You've outlined, Brandon, this is a grand expense that AEW is taking by another night of the week. And we will get into the schedule that it looks like it will be live most Saturdays, with the exception of some Thursdays where they will tape the day after Dynamite. But that is, the value of this deal. And then the larger question is, do we have still this existing January 2020 deal that they're going to ride out until the end with the option year? Or are they going to be entering in a whole new agreement that will encompass everything? That still remains a question after today.
Yeah. So when I said, I figured we would only learn about the TV show, the notion that we would learn about the TV deal today, which was reported that we would learn about the TV deal today. That was something I did not expect to be announced on the stage at the WBD upfront. TV networks and wrestling companies, for that matter, don't disclose, or sports leagues don't go on the record and say our deal is worth $100 million over this many years or whatever. But that usually gets reported by news organizations. Dave Meltzer reported the 2020 deal. You get WWE reports have been reported by the Hollywood Reporter and places like that, but nothing of that nature here. So it leaves the question, is this really an extended new deal? Is this really a new deal that say starts 2025 and goes, as it's been reported or speculated, another 5 years, I guess, to 2030? We have no idea. Or is this merely what I think has got to be at least some extra money going toward covering the high cost of producing an additional weekly in-ring TV show that's going to be live apparently most weeks.
And what do you estimate that cost is for those that maybe are not understand the number, ballpark figure, another night of taping for AEW? What does that mean?
At least $500,000 a week in incremental cost. So that's, if you think about just what the cost must be, I guess it's 52 times $500,000, $26 million or something like that. Am I doing the math right?
The fact that they did announce, there was a lot of focus on Max, of course, but the fact that they did not announce any sort of additional AEW programming for it other than All Access, which I think might have been expected anyway, does it give you pause to think that there could be a deal announced in the future?
When Jesse asked me on WrestleNomics Radio this past Sunday, does this timing make sense? And I expected, because of when I think the deal is going to expire, which is in December 2024, in the past, the WWE deals have been renewed about 18 months in advance, about a year and a half in advance. And we're a little bit before that year and a half mark. So it could add up that just, they're not renewing the deal just yet. And when I heard about the AEW Collision show becoming a new show, I wondered if, maybe they're adding it's interesting that they're adding a new show before making a new deal, but maybe they want to let AEW Collision exist as a TV show and see what kind of rating it can actually do before they enter into a 5-year commitment or something like that, not knowing what kind of ratings this show can actually deliver on a Saturday night. Once everybody started talking about there's a new deal, 5 years, $1 billion, and then things like that, I said, well, I guess they're just going to go for it. But we don't know at this point.
So the announcement came from Kathleen Finch, and this was amidst all of the announcements that WBD made. Before we get into specifics, what was your overall impression just of the WBD presentation today to ad buyers and the presentation itself? I mean, was there anything that jumped out at you? There was a big emphasis on sports.
Just the Joe Schmo show, basically.
The Joe Schmo show, yes. And that Max will be rebranded starting next week as well. So we will be looking towards that as well. Let us talk about the elephant in the room that is CM Punk. So some great detective work by Jimmy Traina of SI, who was the first to note that in the press release that AEW sent out, the original press release, it did include the name CM Punk. But in the revised version that most would have seen, the listed superstars included Thunder Rosa, Miro, Samoa Joe, Powerhouse Hobbs, but no CM Punk. And this has led to a lot of reporting today and different factors that may or may not have gone into this. But I would just say at a glance looking at this, if we were at the point where we're at the goal line here and CM Punk is on the press release and there is enough to remove this man from the press release, I would say that's not just a case of we're just dotting some I's and crossing some T's. Like, to me, on this day, on such a big platform, to be rolling this out, it would seem to me that CM Punk was supposed to be a big part of this day, and he was not part of any of this day other than through Instagram stories.
Yeah, and comicbook.com was able to get a comment from WBD who said that CM Punk is not affiliated with AEW Collision.
And would have been very easy for WBD to just not respond and say anything about CM Punk. Yeah, I mean, you can read into whatever you want from that statement, but AEW is not going to say a word, but for WBD to state that, it was interesting to see Connor Casey getting that quote.
Yeah, so I emailed WBDPR asking them basically, I see that there's this comment here. I just wanted to see if that's accurate. I didn't get a response though. So I wonder if they realized it was probably better to just not say anything in response to it at all. But it does add up with the notion that everybody was speculating about when CM Punk was showing up at Raw in Chicago and at Impact of all places, that there's still some push and pull happening here in the politics of whatever is going on between AEW and CM Punk.
And then tonight, they had Tony Khan. As Excalibur noted, tonight is not a big announcement. It's a big elaboration on the big announcement that Tony Khan would be delivering. And that would be the first initial set of dates for Collision starting June 17th in one of the most historic buildings, location to be announced. I mean, beautiful venue, great food. I've never been to location to be announced, but this being the first Collision taping, I'm sure that then when they were planning strategically this announcement, and they would have the upfront presentation, and then tonight we will announce location to be announced. I'm sure this was all charted out for weeks and months to have this graphic with that specific question mark attached to it. So next week they will announce the location for the first Collision.
It's possible. I mean, it's possible they had a last minute change of heart where they said, hey, maybe we should save this announcement of CM Punk's return for an actual, professional wrestling show. Maybe this week we let Collision take center stage, and the next week we make CM Punk's return take center stage. It's at least possible. But I think just going by the idea that you'd want as many people as possible to know about CM Punk leading this show, attaching CM Punk's name to this brand new show on TNT, it would logically make a lot more sense that you would do both at the same time. But again, so much is going on here that we can really just speculate, really, along with everybody else.
The timing really pushes me towards thinking they probably plan to announce it today, that it would be at the United Center, because it's May 17th. There's only 31 days left to sell tickets.
You got a month, and that's a very big building to sell. Like, I would argue, like, if the question mark about Punk, remember that same week they're running the Wintrust Arena. Like, there's no point to running the United Center if Punk is not on that show. Zero chance. Like, there's no reason to. Like, that's a massive building, and if it's a Punkless Collision, I think I would uproot and move to another building at that point.
I guess, like, what's the logic in, well, we'll wait until next week and announce it at that point, because maybe things will be straightened out with Punk at that time, and then we'll feel more comfortable putting him on the graphics. Whereas right now, things are shaky enough that we're not confident in doing that.
I imagine a lot is still, if there are issues, I'm sure a lot of it might still be in flux at the moment, and maybe they just think, hey, we'll give this a week and maybe things will cool down. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk things through. Again, this is just speculation, of course. Yeah.
All speculation. But I would state that, like, this Saturday night program, it is so tied to CM Punk. I don't think any discussion of Collision goes 10 seconds longer until CM Punk's name does not come up with it. And I would just look at that this franchise, this Collision franchise, needs to be more than just the CM Punk show, because I cannot say 100% that there will be problems, but I would say the probability is high that there will be issues. I mean, let's forget the fact that this is a near 45-year-old who has had several significant injuries over the last year as well. Like, this Saturday night show, it does need to have a lot of star power. It needs to be an A show that you can do a 0.2 on a consistent basis. And it's going to be a very competitive night for them as well. And it just seems like so much is on the shoulders of CM Punk. And it just seems like, just from the outside looking in, you can see the potential for problems, and everyone needs to know this going in. I think you'd be totally naive to be just thinking this is all going to be everyone under two roofs and this is all going to be peachy. I think that is a very, very optimistic view if you're going in with that thought.
I can't imagine Tony really wants to hinge any of his products on one single person, but to start it off, to establish a new night for a promotion, I mean, if you have CM Punk under contract and if he's ready to go, he's not injured, you're looking for a way to reintroduce him without necessarily impacting your current political structure. I understand the idea, to at least use it for a solid year, or however long the duration of his contract is, in order to get the other stars up there.
This reminds me, it reminds me of some relationships I've been in my life where, like, things went well for a while there, and then we kind of broke up, and then we talked about coming back together again, and it'll be different this time, and as soon as that starts, there's already this rupture, and it's just a sign of things to come, perhaps.
Well, it was this all has the makings for potentially an explosive season 2 of All Access if we get there. They can do the Collision Dynamite breakup as they go their separate ways under the AEW umbrella. But I would say, just looking at this, obviously, yes, the big question is the number that is attached to Collision that a lot of people will be curious about. And I guess what rolls out in terms of this first date of Collision. If we are looking, Brandon, like, how much do you sort of like hedge when it comes to Collision? Like, let's say for whatever reason, there is no Punk announcement, and next week comes and goes, and for whatever reason, they do not have Punk committed to this first date. Does that alter your expectations of this Saturday night show? How important is getting Punk on board for this first show and getting this franchise off the ground?
Like, purely focusing on the positive, it's very important. When I was doing my models, I was sort of plugging in to kind of be conservative, to not overestimate the value of the show. I was plugging in like a 0.15 in the demo for Saturday night. So whatever you're doing without Punk, it's going to be lower, and certainly the ticket sales are going to be lower. Ultimately, whether Collision turns out much better than Rampage is going to depend on how important the show feels, how urgently people feel about watching it. Because I think Rampage obviously started out much better. I know the time slot is what it is. It's 10 o'clock on a Friday, and this is Saturday night at 8 to 10. But I think the time slot is better. But it ultimately what caused Rampage to decline was just, I think I heard you guys say it, gradually throughout the weeks. It was just sort of an extra show that you could miss. And you didn't really, miss anything that important if you didn't watch it. So if important things happen on Collision, and important matches happen on Collision, things of consequence are there, then it'll do better than where Rampage is sitting. Where Rampage is bouncing all over the place, but it's sitting around the low tens in terms of a demo rating, and doing like 300,000 or 4,000 viewers, 300,000 or 400,000 viewers.
I mean, the fact that I think we're going to have these separate rosters, and the fact that it's going to be live with its own dedicated night of programming, and not just necessarily being taped in conjunction with your A show and Dynamite, hopefully will suggest that that he's going to take this far more seriously than he takes Rampage. What about the idea that these shows are going to be, for the most part, live? How does this impact AEW's current production structure, and does that pose potential issues?
It's going to make it more expensive. When they're doing the Wednesday and Thursday, which apparently now they're doing 2 nights in Hamilton. So they're already
going to do Wednesday and Thursday night following Forbidden Door in Hamilton.
Right. So, I mean, that's a cheaper way to do it, because you don't have to break down, load in, load out. But it's going to be more difficult on their crew. I wonder if they're going to have to hire more crew to do this, because they're almost doubling their production here.
So the dates that were given out on Dynamite tonight by Tony Khan, the 17th is the to be determined date or location that they stated would be announced next week. Then June 24th is the night before Forbidden Door. So they're doing a second night at Scotiabank Arena. What are both of your expectations for that show? Like, Forbidden Door is sold out. You have a lot of people traveling in, and in theory, we'll have a Saturday night that, especially if you have a Punk on this show and it's the freshness of Collision. I don't know if it's a sellout of Scotiabank Arena, but I would state that I would be optimistic about what they're going to sell for that Toronto date.
I'm very optimistic. I mean, just seeing how much demand there was for Forbidden Door without a card. You're getting a lot of people that are already going to be in town, probably wanting to see this new concept of a show, especially if CM Punk is attached to it. You would think that he'd be a part of Forbidden Door as well, but I think audiences are pretty rabid, especially for a guy like that, and we'll want to see him both nights. So I think it'll do really well, and I think has at least, hey, let's see the card for this first show. How about that? It also poses an opportunity for like a lot of the talent that's only supposed to be on Collision to be. You can only see them on Collision and not necessarily on Forbidden Door, which will be half taken up by New Japan stars as well.
If Punk is there, it'll do quite well, I think, because that'll be the second one, right? Yeah. And if he's not there, I think that's going to cast sort of a shadow on it. Obviously, Forbidden Door is already sold out and will probably be a hot show. I don't know, but it's like thinking about this in the terms that we are, we're like, well, if Punk is there, it'll probably be really good. If not, maybe it's kind of a distraction. It's kind of a putting a cloud over the whole thing. By the time this show happens and the next one, is he still going to be healthy? Is he still going to have not had some sort of major conflict with somebody that's going to cause somebody to not want to work with them anymore or whatever? I'm starting to wonder, as we're sitting here, talking about this, like, how much is the value that CM Punk adds by being a legitimate draw, which I think I've argued he's demonstrated that he was, and probably still is, the strongest draw for ticket sales, TV ratings, pay-per-view buys that AEW has ever had. With that on the table, there's a lot that comes with that, and that is a lot of people now don't want to work with him. He is 44. He's not young. He's gotten injured a couple times. He might be prone to injury again, more so than the average wrestler. How much of that stuff, along with, is there just a distraction factor here in letting everything else in AEW develop and become, more compelling, as opposed to waiting, is Punk going to come back? Is Punk going to come back? As opposed to letting the stars in AEW define their own, their own brand of wrestling.
Well, how much attention have they really given to Punk in anything that they've actually done? I mean,
basically none. But that is the storyline, at least like in the wrestling media world, and we're spending like 20 minutes talking about it, And to some extent that matters. To another extent, people aren't paying any attention to that at all. But some of these conversations that we're having, I think, do bleed down into the general fan base a lot more than they did in years prior,
especially for AEW's audience.
True. Yeah.
I would say it's a very small number of talents that would have this amount of leeway, that your promoter, your booker would go to such an extent to keep happy, to be able to work with. But I would put Punk in that list. I think like it does come with its positives and negatives, but when it comes to the game that Tony Khan is playing to secure this company's future with WBD, CM Punk is a huge spoke in that wheel. And I think he realizes that. And it's this guy shows up at a Raw unannounced. This guy is, we're hoping to make an announcement for whatever reason. We can't make that announcement on the upfront day. Yeah, there are certain talents that I think he would be just putting his hands up to a certain extent. But he's someone as well in Punk that I would be very curious to one day like hear him on the record speak about sort of his side in all this, and not be speaking on Instagram stories or off the record. He is more than welcome to join us at the Forbidden Pour. We would be more than happy to find a microphone for him. But yeah, to answer your question, Brandon,
Hopefully
I think
it would lead to a lawsuit.
It could be very possible. I think he's so key to getting this show up and running. And I think if they're consistently doing like a 0.15 that you outlined, like that will probably get you into like the top 10 on Saturdays among cable numbers. And I think if they can do above that and a 0.2 or higher, I think they're going to be exceptionally happy, because this is not a night that TNT dominates outside of like when they have a playoff game or the NBA All-Star game. So, AEW can certainly make their mark on that network on a Saturday night, and CM Punk is going to give them the fastest route to that.
Yeah, 15 would put them this past Saturday at number 15. So put them in the top 20. And if I'm being too conservative and they can get up to like a 0.20, that would put them in the top 10.
All right. So I think that would be the reasonable range that you would be looking at for this. So probably more to come in the drama that is Collision as we count down with a month to go. Brandon, I'm sure you will be chatting more about this. The two of us will be interviewing Tony Maglio this coming Friday. So look out for that on the WrestleNomics and Post Wrestling channels. Post Wrestling and Poison Rana, we are teaming up.
The Forbidden Pour, Post Wrestling and Poison Rana, the same day. If for anyone traveling in for Forbidden Door, we will be literally steps away from the Scotiabank Arena. It is right next door. It is attached to the arena. We're going to have a pre-party. John and Wei, you guys are going to do a podcast before the show, but it's afterwards that the after party is where things are really going to kick off, because we're going to do some wrestling karaoke.
And it's already been promised that a Mr. John Pollock is going to sing All In by Downstate.
Yeah, he agreed. It was in the contract. We've been throwing a few parties before, but nothing this big, nothing this huge. This is our double or nothing, really, and we're so excited. This is going to be a blast. If you're thinking about Forbidden Door weekend, now is your chance, because tickets are available now, aren't they, Wei?
Yes, they are right now. Postwrestling.com/live. I'm super excited.